This is the Nerdiest podcast on Spotify, episode 9 of the Nerdiest podcast. And today we've got a banger topic. We're going to go into some Star Wars, some things I want to see from the future of Star Wars, and some upcoming projects that I'm hyped for in the Star Wars universe. So, welcome to episode 9 of the Nerdiest podcast on Spotify. And today's topic is going to be the Star Wars universe, the Star Wars franchise. Jedis, you've got Sith, you've got droids, you've got lightsabers, you've got ships, you've got Yoda, you've got Jar Jar Binks, Darth Vader, and Palpatine. I love Star Wars. I have loved Star Wars since I watched the originals with my dad. It's very much a family sort of thing. It's very much sort of sentimental, and it's very, just sci-fi awesomeness. I love Star Wars so much. It is one of my biggest, you've got DC, you've got Marvel, but Star Wars is something so much different than those two. It's so good on its own, you know what I mean? It's such a great franchise, and it is so, every time something new comes out for it, it is so awesome just to get back into watching the films or playing the games and just getting back into liking Star Wars, which is kind of hard to do nowadays in the modern age, because we're in a sort of downward spiral for Star Wars right now. We're in sort of the lowest of the low for the franchise. I mean, we've had the 3 sequel trilogy, The Force Awakens, The Rise of Skywalker, and I forgot the name. It's so bad, I forgot the name. The Rise of Skywalker, Force Awakens, and The Last Jedi. So, yeah, those 3 were not well received by the fans. So, yeah. In this episode, we're obviously talking about Star Wars. But we're also going to be talking about upcoming Star Wars projects, some past projects that were not well received and sort of maybe helped in the decline of the franchise recently. So, the recent decline of it. A lot of fans don't have faith in Disney Star Wars. So obviously George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars, the creator of the original trilogy, sold the rights to create Star Wars films to Disney. And that's going to go down as one of the biggest mistakes for the franchise ever, I think. I think Disney Star Wars has its ups and it has its downs, and that's the same with George Lucas's Star Wars. It has its ups and has its downs. But the downs for the Disney Star Wars has it outweighs the good, in my opinion. There are some good moments and there are some bad moments.
Ray Skywalker.
I think that's pretty fair for everything, really, but when it comes to Star Wars, there are bad moments and then there are really, really bad moments.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
I want to start by talking, so we're going to be talking about Star Wars, upcoming projects, past projects, a sequel trilogy that could have been George Lucas's sequel, Episode 7, that could have been, and the plans for that could have been for Episode 7, George Lucas's original plans if he didn't sell to Disney. We're also going to be talking about Star Wars Mandu? Who's that? Mandalorian and Grogu, the next big Star Wars project, releasing in 2026, later this year. And it's going to be the first Star Wars film since Return of the... No, what was it? I can't remember the names. Since Episode 9, right? So that was the last film we've had as a blockbuster in the cinemas, in the theaters, that you could go watch a Star Wars film in the cinema, right? That was the last time, and that was like over almost 5 years ago, I think. So this is a big moment for Star Wars. All eyes are on the Star Wars universe. They are on this Mandalorian and Grogu. As we approach its release, people are gonna hopefully get excited. I don't think many people are as excited as for, Doomsday or for other projects. We have the resurgence of DC, which is not gonna help with Star Wars resurgence. I can assure you that, because all eyes are on DC, all eyes are on Marvel. And we've actually talked about Marvel and DC. So we've obviously talked about DC's Supergirl coming out later this year. We've talked about Avengers Doomsday as well. So those are the next, those are the DC and Marvel films coming out in this year. We've also talked about Stranger Things. So we've talked about a few franchises, but I really wanted to talk about Star Wars because it's one of my favorite franchises, and I can talk about it for hours and hours, which I'm probably going to end up doing. But like I said, the Star Wars universe, I think, is really at a low point, and it shouldn't really be, because it's such a great franchise. I feel like it could possibly beat like DC and maybe even Marvel in the box office, People want Star Wars films. It's not like they don't want Star Wars. They want lightsaber fights. They want awesome, cool blaster fights and starfighter fights. That's why I wanted to talk about it on here, because I need to get it off my chest, because I really, really would like more Star Wars content to talk about. So let's get into some upcoming projects for Star Wars. What are the upcoming projects in the Star Wars universe? So as I just stated, we have got the next big thing for Star Wars, Mandalorian and Grogu. I don't really know much about this film. It comes out May 2026. That's all I know, really. I've watched the trailer, but they don't reveal much plot for it. Other than the title, which is obviously Mandalorian and Grogu. So, Mandalorian was a show on Disney Plus. Well, it's a character, and the show was about him. That's going to be quite a challenge to, you've got a character from a Disney Plus show that you're transforming into a film. And people who aren't that into Star Wars might not have watched the show, or they might have watched bits of the show and they don't know where he's at right now. So it looks like to me from the trailer, they have sort of regressed this character from season 2 and 3 of Mandalorian. If you haven't seen that, go watch it. It's pretty good. And also go watch Boba Fett, because that's pretty much the 4th season of Mandalorian, I think. Book of Boba Fett, is a lot of Mandalorian, and it's got Luke Skywalker in it, which doesn't make sense really, because it's Book of Boba Fett, not Book of Mandalorian and Luke. But anyway, I'm going off track. Mandalorian Grogu, the next Star Wars film, the big next Star Wars film to come out. Will it hit? Will it reinvent Star Wars? Will it get new fans? I don't think so. I think it doesn't really make sense to me. You're bringing back Star Wars to the big screens after a long hiatus. You've been doing loads of Disney Plus shows, which I'll get into a bit. We have Ahsoka, obviously. We have the Book of Boba Fett, which I just mentioned, and we have some other ones that were kind of flops, I'm not gonna lie, but yeah. So the Mandalorian and Grogu. But the Mandalorian Disney Plus show stood out to me as a really great show. I watched all seasons. I thought it was great when it came out, and then I completely forgot about it, right? Because they didn't release consistently, like consistent seasons, there was massive gaps between seasons. And that caused me to sort of forget the plot of and they sort of merge in my mind together of what the show was about. It was about the Baby Yoda character and this Mandalorian character. But then after that season 1, where you set that up, they sort of go off the tracks and do some other cool stuff and some, controversial stuff. But Do I think it will work in a film? I personally hope it does, because then obviously Star Wars will then be back. But it needs to top Supergirl and Doomsday, and there's no way they're doing that with the Mandalorian and Grogu character. The only way I could imagine them doing that is if they did what they did at the end of season 2 of Mando, which was deep fake Luke Skywalker, or get Sebastian Stan to play a younger Luke and have that cameo in there, because then that will then amplify it. Because if you're adding Jedis to a Star Wars film, people are going to go watch it. People might not go watch a film about a rogue bounty hunter and a baby Yoda, you know what I mean? I'm definitely going to go see it, for sure, because I want to see what happens to these characters. I want to see Star Wars. I want to see more Star Wars content, even if it is bad necessarily. You know, if it's bad, I don't really mind, because I went to go see a Star Wars film, and that's exciting. At least it gets me hyped, I guess. But yeah, Mandalorian is such it came out during COVID, and it was such well, I think it came out during COVID, but it was predominant for me when I was watching it in COVID, and I really enjoyed it. But I don't think it's suited for a film. For a film, because I don't know, it just doesn't seem to me. Star Wars films are these epic blockbuster with lightsabers and famous characters, you know, Luke, Leia, Rey, and Finn, and you know, Darth Vader, Obi-Wan, Yoda. These are the Star Wars films. So, I don't know, I'm not really fussed about it. I'm gonna have to wait and see until it releases. I'm glad they are putting out more Star Wars films. Would I rather this be a season of Mandalorian? I don't know. Probably not, right? Because it just gets a bit boring after having like 4 or 5 seasons. So yeah, so that's the next Star Wars projects set to release in 2026. The next one is obviously going to be we have Star Wars Starfighter. Now, I've done a little bit of research on this project, as there's not a lot of public knowledge of what the plot is, of the story. If you do not know, Star Wars Starfighter stars Ryan Gosling as a lead in the film. It's a Star Wars film set to release in 2027. I don't know if it's a Jedi film or if it's a scoundrel film like Han Solo, but by the title, I'm assuming it means starfights, right? So like, maybe he's gonna be like a Poe Dameron type character. But alongside Ryan Gosling's character, there is a younger sort of a teenage boy, right? So it just seems to me like there's this I love the Joel and Ellie dynamic. You know, I talked about it in the Supergirl episode with the younger girl and obviously Kara. That's the whole dynamic in that film. But then they were also doing the same thing here. It's a very common trope, right? Having an older role model type character guide this younger sort of reckless character across the journey. And I call it the Joel and Ellie dynamic because obviously Last of Us is one of my most favorite films. Games. It is a TV show. I didn't really watch most of that show, but anyway, we're going off track now. So the Joel and Ellie dynamic seems to be apparent in Starfighter with Ryan Gosling and the younger kid. The kid, I think, is confirmed almost. I think it's confirmed that he is a Force-sensitive child. So it seems to me like it's going to be very much like, sort of like Obi-Wan protecting Luke from the Empire, right? I mean, it is set 5 years after the episode 9. So obviously the Empire sort of is the first order now. The first order is still about. So I'm assuming, yeah, Ryan Gosling and this kid is going across the galaxy in escaping the First Order in a starfighter. I don't know. In a pilot, he's piloting a ship possibly. I'm looking forward to it. That's the basic plot, though. So the basic plot is this guy's been tasked to looking after this kid, to protect this kid, from the mother who has been cast. I forgot the actress's name, but she has been cast, and she sent Ryan Gosling. She's ordered him to look after her son from the First Order, because he's force sensitive, and obviously force sensitive children is always a problem for the Empire, right? Something that I found really interesting about this Star Wars project, Star Wars Starfighter, was that recently it's been announced that Tom Cruise from the Mission Impossible franchise came to visit the production of this latest Star Wars movie, and he apparently was allowed to sort of direct or sort of boss around a lightsaber duel, which is kind of interesting to me, because I thought this show would be about, starfighters, I thought it'd be like starship fights, sort of like Poe Dameron, Han Solo, smuggler type stuff. But now this is giving me second thoughts, because Tom Cruise directing a duel, a Star Wars lightsaber duel, is interesting, because I didn't expect there to be even lightsabers in the show, or I didn't realize there would be Jedis. This has piqued my interest, and it's got me excited, because I really want to see lightsabers and duels on the big screen again. So hopefully more, stuff comes out for this movie. We get a trailer, or we get some more announcements. I'm really going to keep my eye out, because Star Wars Starfighters seems really awesome. You got Ryan Gosling, Matt Smith. Now, the villain for this film is apparently going to be played by Matt Smith, which, if you do not know, he is the 11th Doctor in Doctor Who, one of my favorite sci-fi shows, and I really love him as an actor. He was also in that Spider-Man film, that Marvel one that really flopped, the Sony one. I can't remember the name, but he was in that as a villain. He could play a very convincing villain, and I feel like he would suit the Star Wars universe. The Star Wars universe, right? I don't know what type of villain he would play. Maybe a Sith, maybe a brother of the Sith, the guild that hunts Jedi. I cannot remember. It's like the Inquisitors. He could be playing an Inquisitor in this film, hunting down that young Force sensitive, and Ryan Gosling has to stop him with his ship or something. I don't know. So the director has piqued my interest, as he has revealed information about this film, Jedi. I keep saying Jedi Starfighter. It's called Star Wars Starfighter, which is a mouthful in itself. So he has come forth and he has said this about Star Wars Starfighter.
Starfighter is not a sequel. It's not a prequel. It's a new standalone adventure with new characters taking place in a new time period.
So he has said that this is a standalone project. It is not connected to the sequels, originals, or prequels in any way. It doesn't have Skywalker or anything connected. It doesn't have Darth Vader. Well, it might have Darth Vader, but it's not, well, obviously Darth Vader's dead at this point. You know what I mean? It's not going to have, like, Luke Skywalker or Rey or anything. It's not going to be connected to that sequel ending as well. So it's going to be a separate project set in the Star Wars universe. That has really piqued my interest, because I feel like that's what Star Wars needs. It needs a breath of fresh air. It's set up this awesome universe with lightsabers and hyperspace, but we need to expand it by doing separate projects. So, for example, Rogue One. I recently rewatched that film for preparation for this episode, because I knew Starfighter would be a topic that I wanted to talk about. It's an upcoming standalone film set away from the rest. Obviously, Rogue One has its ties to the original. Obviously, it goes straight right into the original, but it is a standalone story. It doesn't have ties to, the prequels, right? And that's why it's one of the best Star Wars films. And it's because it expands the Star Wars universe by not sticking with these characters that we all know and love, right? So, for example, like the Obi-Wan Kenobi Disney Plus show, which I will get into in a minute, it was a flop because it was trying to do some fanfare for the Skywalker saga, and it just didn't work because it wasn't its own thing. It was trying to be a part of that part of that story, and it just didn't fit in. You know what I mean? It was trying too hard to be a Skywalker project, and so I want to see more standalone, original ideas Star Wars movies. I don't want to see a trilogy about the same set of people, the same cast, the same heritage. I want to see I want stories to be told in this universe. It's in this galaxy far, far away. There are so many stories you can talk about. I want more out of timeline projects. So, for example, we've had Rogue One and we've had Han Solo, the Star Wars story. That was one of my favorite Star Wars films as well. I just love it. It wasn't really that well received, but me personally, it's one of my favorites. I love Han Solo. So that is Jedi. I keep saying that. Damn. That is Star Wars Starfighter, set to release in 2027. Directed by Sean Levy and starring Ryan Gosling and Matt Smith as a villain. I'm excited for this. It's going to be cool. So yeah, let's talk about some projects, some recent Star Wars projects that have come out that may have contributed to the downfall or the current state of Star Wars. So the current state I would describe is low. It's pretty not active. It's not mainstream. Nobody's really talking about Star Wars anymore, which is a shame. Obviously, there are fans. There are always going to be Star Wars fans. I mean, I'm actively a fan without, being engaged with it. I could be watching a Marvel film and still consider myself a Star Wars fan. It's not like I'm betraying Star Wars or anything by not intaking their content. Well, there isn't much content to intake anymore, but yeah. Let's get into some content that has released, some shows on Disney Plus that have released. So, once the sequel trilogy has released, Disney take a step back from creating big films. Obviously they haven't created big films since the episode 9. We got Mandalorian and Grogu coming out this year, which is the next film since episode 9 to come out. They have been focusing on putting shows on Disney Plus on streaming platforms. Let's go through some of these shows and some of the shows that I like, some things that I like about the shows, and some things and some shows that I despise or do not like, right? So let's talk about it. So after episode 9, they released, obviously, the Disney Plus. They focused on releasing Disney Plus shows such as The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett, Andor, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Those are the main ones I'm going to be talking about. There may be a few that are out that I haven't seen, or I haven't really, like Skeleton Crew, I haven't seen that. Or The Acolyte and Bad Batch and stuff like that. I haven't watched them fully. I have watched, obviously, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian, Andor, and Ahsoka. Let's talk about Mandalorian. So The Mandalorian, obviously, it hit Disney Plus, and when it hit when the season 1 hit and episode 1 hit, it was a massive hit. You know, they hit this up because everyone wanted more Star Wars. Everyone wants more Star Wars. When you have Pedro Pascal with a cute little baby Yoda flying around in a jetpack in Tatooine with a blaster, that's gonna make people watch, even if it's not even in the cinema. You know, they're gonna sit at home and they're gonna watch that. And it was very entertaining. I loved the whole vibes of the first season of Mandalorian. It was such, like, for me, I think it gave me hope. And that's very funny because Star Wars is all about hope, right? Rebellions are built on hope. But Mandalorian gave me hope that maybe Disney knows what they're doing, and maybe the sequel trilogy wasn't, well, obviously was pretty bad, but maybe give them a chance, you know, with the Mandalorian. And as the show progressed, I kind of lost that hope because it became messy, it became unorderly, it became something completely different than what season 1 was. And I think that is due to its popularity, for one, but I also think it's due to that story being so predominant over the sequel trilogy. The Mandalorian story was so good in season 1. Everyone was watching Mandalorian. That was peak Star Wars compared to the sequel trilogy. Nobody was watching that. But they would watch Mandalorian because it's sort of separate on its own, right? Maybe that's why it was so good, because it was a standalone project. But I think the story outshined the sequels, and people wanted more, and they were watching on for the story and not really the characters or the aesthetic of the show, which was the vibe of season 1 for me. Was the aesthetic was so in your face. It was like a cowboy film, right? Where in the latter seasons of Mandalorian became sort of like more Star Warsy, you know what I mean? It became more like less of a Mandalorian and more of like a Star Wars film, because you get obviously different Mandalorians. You get Bo-Katan, I think her name is, right? Then you get Boba Fett as well, and I think that's really good for the Mandalorians. But you also get world building of the Star Wars planets and Star Wars world, you know, and everybody loves that because everybody loves Star Wars. But yeah, that's the Mandalorian. I like Mandalorian. I like Baby Grogu. I think the potential is there. It's just what they do with it is, you gotta have hope, you know, they don't screw it up. I mean, they might. I'm not gonna lie, they might screw it up. But if they do, they do. I'm not really as fussed as I was about the sequel trilogy, because obviously we just met these characters. We don't know much about the Mandalorian. He's still kind of mysterious because he is a Mandalorian. All Mandalorians are mysterious. Going off of the Mandalorian, we had the Book of Boba Fett, which is obviously about Boba Fett, one of my favorite characters in Star Wars. I don't know, this show was weird for me. It came out at a really weird time where TV shows on streaming services were the thing, right? They were the thing, and everybody was watching it. It was the pandemic, I believe, yeah. And the Book of Boba Fett, there's some problems with it, but overall I think it's probably like a 5 out of 10. It's just, yeah, you know, Boba Fett was so cool in the originals. He was this masked Mandalorian. And it's sort of like they made Boba Fett the Mandalorian. The Mandalorian from the Mandalorian TV show merged with the Boba Fett from the original trilogy. It felt like nothing. They felt like there's two same characters, which is not good because this character's been around since the originals. He's in the Clone Wars. He's a clone, right? He's not Pedro Pascal. And looking back on the show, it was mostly filler, right? I mean, some of the stories were pretty cool. I liked the whole Jabba's Hutt place, Jabba the Hutt palace, I think, and the setting on Tatooine, and him getting his armor in The Mandalorian. That was then when he went to go get his armor in The Mandalorian. That was peak Boba Fett's back, you know. And then they gave him a show, and they had Cad Bane And yeah, he was pretty cool, I guess, but they didn't really do much with him after, so it's like, what's the heck of introducing him in the finale episode if you're not gonna introduce him in future projects? I don't know. It's the same thing with Obi-Wan Kenobi. That show was alright. I'd give it a solid 4 out of 10. I think it would have benefited as being a film, and I feel like that would have been a perfect film, rather than having Mandalorian and Grogu to bring back Star Wars. If they were to hold off and make it a film and release it this year instead of Mandalorian and Grogu, imagine an Obi-Wan Kenobi standalone film. That would work so well. It would be like Rogue One, because it's loosely connected to the Star Wars canon, the Star Wars, the trilogies, right? But it's sort of its own thing, and I feel like if they had it as a movie, they could have spread that story out, and it kind of felt like it was being cushioned by the fact that it's a show, and it didn't feel fully fleshed out because it was a show. The effects were pretty cool. I mean, the lightsaber duels were a bit mid, but I can understand that because Obi-Wan's an old man, right? But yeah, I don't really like that show. I haven't rewatched it since it released. Yeah, it's kind of mid, right? Ahsoka. Let's talk about Ahsoka. So, the Ahsoka show was pretty good. I would give it like a solid 8 out of 10. Compared to the rest, it was night and day. It was pretty good. I didn't really watch Clone Wars. I'm not really into that sort of style of show. I couldn't really watch Rebels, but I obviously know the Ahsoka character and that she's the apprentice of Anakin, right? Her now being grown up in the sort of New Hope, isn't it? New Hope era of Star Wars, I'm pretty sure. But I think it was such a visually beautiful a visually beautiful series with awesome effects. I think the effects, the droids, the ship, the hyperspace was really cool. The big bad of the series was awesome. And yeah, they're making a season 2, which is supposed to come out, I think, this year, supposedly. It doesn't have a release date, but I'm excited for that if they do release it, because Ahsoka is so different from other apprentices. Apprentices? Yeah, I think that's the word. She is her own Jedi. She isn't like Anakin. I like to say it because she was sandwiched between Obi-Wan and Anakin growing up. She is between them. She is the grey between light, which is Obi-Wan, and the dark, which is obviously Anakin. So she's a grey Jedi. It's been confirmed that she's a grey Jedi. She was obviously introduced in Mandalorian, and then she got her own spin-off, like Boba Fett. I think that was handled a lot better though than Boba Fett. It didn't really feel like many episodes had filler episodes. Yeah, Ahsoka, I would definitely rewatch that. They had a lot of Clone Wars returning characters, which obviously, and Rebels returning characters, should I say. Obviously that would help if I watched that show, but I didn't. But I still connected with it really well, which makes sense, which makes it, 10 times better than Book of Boba Fett. So those are some of the Star Wars projects that sort of contributed to the current state of Star Wars. So obviously after the sequel trilogy, Disney focused on streaming services, and that's what we got. We got some awesome shows, some awesome moments, but we also got some really, really bad shows, really awful moments. I'm talking about that Boba Fett scene with the colourful scooters and the cyborg skies on Tatooine. It just was so out of place for Tatooine. I don't know why they did that. It looks like they're from like Naboo or Coruscant. It doesn't make sense for them to be there. It's just weird. Anyway, next up, let's talk about some things I want to see. So, I want to see a Palpatine origin series on Disney+. So, if you don't know what the High Republic is, the High Republic era of Star Wars is the era before the prequels. It's before the Jedi Order. Well, it's the origin of the Jedi Order, and it's the the time where Siths were a myth, right? They were sort of a myth. I think the High Republic era had potential to be one of the best to focus on it for films and shows, because it's such a great unexplored area of Star Wars. For example, the Acolyte, that was set in the High Republic era. I didn't finish Acolyte. I couldn't finish it. It was, for me personally, wasn't attracted to it in any way. It was kind of boring. But obviously the era that it's set is beautiful, in my opinion. I think it really screams Star Wars more than anything that we've ever seen, which is crazy to say, but it's true. Go watch that for an idea of what I'm talking about, the High Republic era of Star Wars. Obviously, Emperor Palpatine is a big character throughout the Star Wars movies, right? He returns in the sequels, and he is a big character in the prequels and the originals. I want to see his origin as a apprentice to Plagueis, right? His name is his Sith master, and he was an apprentice to Plagueis. I want to see him be corrupted by the Force. I want him to be. He isn't a Sith in my eyes. Palpatine is gone further than evil or good. He is the Force incarnated, and I think like the potential to not only expand his story, but to expand the Star Wars story that we will love is so off the charts. You know, like I said earlier, I want more out-of-timeline projects. This could easily be an out-of-timeline project. You can just reference the originals or the prequels. This is separate from it's before it, so it doesn't have to even, like, retcon things or anything. You can do so much with this. It's just sitting right there. Loads of money could be made from a TV. You can make it a TV show, or you can make it a film, like you did Rogue One. Or should I say Solo, because that's more of an origin story for Han Solo. But then you could have it just Palpatine. Holy voice crack. You could have a Palpatine origin film. I feel like that would sell really well. I want like ominous Palpatine music. I want him to have cool duels with the Jedi Order, and I want him to be sort of not in your face and such a Sith character. I want him to be a myth. I want him to be sort of like a ghost, right? So yeah. At the end of Acolyte, we actually got a reveal of Plagueis, so I'm assuming if they were going ahead with Acolyte Season 2, which I don't think they are anymore, they were going to expand upon that, which would have been exciting, and we might have even seen Palpatine in Acolyte, but I don't think we're going to see that anytime soon. So yeah. Another thing that I would like to see in the future of Star Wars, I want to see, so I've played Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, and obviously the main character of those games, those Star Wars games, is Cal Kestis. I want to see Cal Kestis in live action. I want to see him show up in Ahsoka, or in, I want to see him just show up. I want the actor who plays him in the games to show up in a Star Wars project, and then I would be fangirling really hard there. So, personally, he's one of my favorite Jedi, because he's just so awesome. He's so different from what we've seen before. He's a survivor of Order 66, and he's not so much like a Jedi. He doesn't go by the Jedi ways. He's pretty much a grey Jedi. And I feel like that we need more of that to have more fun with the characters and the universe itself. So yeah, I want to see him in live action. I feel like that'd be really fun. Speaking of games, I want to talk about some video games I want in the future of Star Wars, because I love video games. I love Marvel Rivals. I want to see a new Jedi game. So obviously we've had Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor. I want to see a new Jedi game. I want it to be a trilogy of games with this Cal Kestis character, like the character who I was just talking about. I want to see him come to live action before the third game, though. I would prefer mainline, because then it would sell more. I feel like he would sell more copies of the game if he was actually canon in some films, you know? I don't really have many ideas about the Jedi game. Maybe we will talk about that in an episode when it gets announced or something, because I'm pretty sure it's confirmed to be coming. Let's talk about the controversial Star Wars past films that were sort of controversial for Star Wars. And for me, personally, the first 3 films, the original trilogy from George Lucas, perfection. Peak Star Wars, you know what I mean? And then he released the 3 with Obi-Wan and Hayden Christensen. I don't know. Is it the prequel, trequel? No. It's the originals, the prequel. No, the prequels. Yeah. So he then released the 3 prequel films, which were then absolutely not well received by the fans, and the fans thought he was destroying the franchise. But over time, those films are now loved by fans because of what Disney did to, I think it's personally, I think it's because what Disney did to the Star Wars universe. They upped it, right? So they made it worse. The prequel trilogy is not bad at all. I think they were just a bit, because it's like, you release 3 films, right? And they aren't as good as the past 3 films, which then makes them bad, but then you release another 3 films which are worse than the last 3 films, so then that last 3 films aren't as bad as what it was originally thought. So I think it's just sort of like, I don't know, something weird going on there. But Disney released the sequel trilogy, and everybody crawls back to the prequels and the originals, and they love them. That is peak Star Wars right there. George Lucas, you know, everyone loves him. So yeah, Disney's sequels were bad. I'm telling you this now. They were awful for the franchise. They got people in seats, and they got loads of money, I think, and they got loads of, but it was not well received at all. The sequel trilogy will go down as the worst, trilogy in Star Wars for sure, because I don't know what went wrong, but, I'll get into some things that I think were wrong to do. But yeah, I think it was a hot mess, especially the last 2 films. The Force Awakens was pretty neat because it was the resurgence of Star Wars after such a long time. It's what they need to be doing now. They need to be doing what The Force Awakens did. They need to be building this hype, right? But The Force Awakens was a solid start. But it doesn't The Force Awakens lacks because of the last 2. Because the last 2 were so bad, The Force Awakens itself is then bad, right? I personally do love it, but the fans obviously, they are very opinionated about those 3 films. Let's get into some problems with the sequel trilogy, the Star Wars sequel trilogy that I have personally. I disliked Finn's underuse. So obviously, you know, Finn is the stormtrooper, or what is it? Yeah, stormtrooper who turns to the good side, to the rebellion. And the reason why I just did not like how they wrote his character is because they teased us in The Force Awakens. And I feel like it was their original plan to have Finn become a Jedi like Rey, to be Force sensitive, to wield a lightsaber, right? That's what they did in Force Awakens. If you watch Force Awakens, he wields a lightsaber, and it looks so badass. Let's get into the beefy part of this episode, which is the Star Wars sequel trilogy, Episode 7, that we could have got. So, if you did not know, Episode 7 was originally going to be George Lucas's sequel. It was going to be his Episode 7. And I am quickly going to go over what his plans were for Episode 7 and for the future of Star Wars, starting obviously from the end of the prequels, but timeline order wise going past the originals. It's kind of confusing. But if George Lucas was to keep his original ideas and Disney wasn't involved, we would have had this as Episode 7. So he wanted to have a more mystical Star Wars. You would show a more mystical more mystical side of Star Wars. So episode 7 would have more of the Force. It would have more Force-like creatures, some sort of creatures that tap into the Force and are pure Force beings. A bit like Avatar. I'm just thinking in my mind, Avatar was very mystical, and I feel like that would fit Star Wars really well. It would expand what we know as Star Wars from the originals and the prequels into more of a Force and more of a mystical sci-fi sort of just space. You know, it would have made it so much more beautiful as well. You could do some awesome visual effects. Again, in George Lucas's sequel, Episode 7, the original trio, which is Heya. What the fuck? What's Heya, bruh? That's not an original trio. We got Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, and Leia Organa, or Leia Skywalker. It's kind of confusing. The original trio reunite, which is something that this sequel trilogy, the Disney sequel trilogy, did not accomplish. They sort of had they sort of had that moment between Luke and Leia in The Last Jedi, but it was so weak, and it was just didn't felt like the reunited trio that we needed. They obviously killed off Han Solo in The Force Awakens, which I hated, but I guess they needed to kill them off, I feel like, but they also didn't. I don't know. It's confusing. So the original trilogy was supposed to be back in George Lucas's sequel, which everybody would have loved that. You know, Luke, Leia, and Han is what I think about when I think Star Wars. He was going to have Darth Maul return from, obviously, Phantom Menace when he gets cut in half. That whole Darth Maul timeline, which we have got, which is canon to Star Wars, would have happened, and he would have returned with a crime syndicate, which is very similar to what happened, obviously, in Han Solo, the Solo story movie, whatever you call it. Darth Maul has a crime syndicate, but in this George Lucas sequel, he has a Sith apprentice called Talon, Sith Talon, who was a apprentice to Darth Maul and was trained in the Sith ways, right? So that's really interesting. Like, the big bad is the apprentice of Darth Maul. We could have had Luke go against Darth Maul, and Darth Maul be like the emperor of the sequels, sort of like overlooking everything, the big bad of the big bad, you know what I mean? That would have been cool, I guess. I really love Darth Maul. As a villain, he's really scary. Yeah, that would have been awesome. And obviously it says here, like, he wanted to explore the mystical side of Star Wars more. You could have explored the dark side of Star Wars, like the Sith powers and the dark side, and obviously the Jedi powers. You could explore that. I think that's what he means by mystical, is the Force. It surrounds us all, and that would have been awesome to see. And then he was planning on having Han Solo and Leia's children, should I say. He had a son and a daughter, which their roles sort of become Rey and Finn in the Disney sequel. So Disney obviously took ideas from George's sequel, obviously, for Episode 7, and may have stolen, I'm not accusing anyone, but could have possibly rewritten his characters into their story. So Rey would have been Leia's daughter, and Finn, Han Solo's son. Because George originally wanted Han Solo's son to be a defected stormtrooper, which is what Finn is. And they wanted Leia's daughter to be a sort of scavenger. And obviously they separate somehow. I don't know how, but that's really interesting to me that Disney sort of loosely follow that story still with Rey and Finn. So yeah, that is George Lucas's sequel trilogy for, well, that's for episode 7 alone. I'm sure he had bigger ideas for 3 films, right? It would have been awesome to see his trilogies have a trilogy, so the original, the prequel, and the sequel of George Lucas's films. Obviously, that would have been awesome, but yeah, do I think it would be better than the Disney one? That's impossible to say, because we'll never know, will we? So obviously he's the original creator, and he obviously has he has the idea, he has the creative passion for it, I'm assuming. So yeah, it would have been interesting to see, but we're never going to see it. So yeah. I also wanted to briefly touch upon Michael Arnett's, I think I said that wrong, but he is the producer or screenwriter for George Lucas, and he stayed on after George Lucas was pushed away from his own creation by Disney. Well, George sold his creation to Disney, but Michael stayed on as screenwriter for episode 7 before being replaced. He takes inspiration from George Lucas's sequel, but there's a few different things that I want to talk about, which I think is really awesome. And there are some concept art for these plans. So he planned to have the Kylo Ren gang that he had. I forgot the name. It's like the Gang of Ren or something. Still hunting Jedi, so sort of like the Inquisitors, but obviously Kylo Ren. He was planning on having Kylo Ren, and the whole Han Solo and Leia children thing, with Finn and Rey still remained, and he was going to have the original trilogy trio reunite, which obviously Disney decided not to do, which obviously George was very passionate about having the trio reunite, because it's Star Wars. It was Star Wars with Han, Leia, and Luke. That's peak. You're not going to go anywhere. One of the big different things, though, from George and from Disney sequels trilogy is to Michael's trilogy is in episode 8, Michael Arnett wanted a Anakin Force ghost to haunt the main characters, and Rey. Obviously, he wanted Rey to travel to the planet where Darth Vader's base is. I forgot what it's called. It's like a volcanic base. I don't know what it's called, but she goes there and battles Anakin's Force ghost, which then transforms into Darth Vader. And I feel like that's a really cool concept, like having the ghost form of Anakin corrupted by the dark side. So obviously at the end of Revenge of the Sith with the Ewoks, I believe, we see Anakin's Force ghost, and it's blue. I would like to see Anakin's, so that's his Jedi Force ghost. What about his Sith side? His his evil Force ghost. What if that remains in his Darth Vader's base, right? And it's like a ghost that haunts Rey and taunts Rey and fights Rey. I feel like that would be really interesting to see. Anakin's Force ghost fighting Rey, fighting, Luke. The original trilogy would be awesome. And then it would be better than having Palpatine return, because Palpatine return, that was one of my biggest nitpicks with the Disney sequel trilogy. Having Emperor Palpatine not die is just crazy to me. I mean, you go 2 films, you go Force Awakens, you go Last Jedi without having any hints to him returning. Any hints at all. You could watch those first 2 and without knowing who the Emperor is, and you won't understand who the Emperor, it doesn't make sense to me why you wouldn't at least hint at him returning. To me, it seems like you didn't have any idea of, or planning on him returning anyway, so then you just chuck him in the last film and it's really rushed. He's not that scary. He's made to look scary, but he's not that scary at the end of the day. Kylo Ren was more scarier than the Emperor in the sequel trilogy. There, I said it, Kylo Ren is one of my favorite characters from the sequels, just because of the fact that he's saying he's my favorite is kind of crazy, because he's written poorly. I would say he's written poorly, but given the chance, given given the chance to rewrite him, he could have been one of the best Star Wars characters written ever. The son of Han Solo becomes a Sith after his father completely neglects him, right? I think that's such a great idea. It makes me so mad, because of the potential that these characters from Force Awakens could have had in in episode, 8 and 9. Yeah, it's kind of annoying, but yeah. We'll never see George Lucas's sequel trilogy or Michael Arnett's sequel trilogy, but it's fun to, see what they were planning on doing. Obviously we haven't had episode 8 or 9 of George Lucas's come out, but episode 7, it seemed pretty promising, having Darth Maul and Darth Talon and the mystical side of Star Wars. I would have killed to see more of the mystical side of Star Wars, because that's pretty much what Star Wars is all about. It's all about the Force, it's all about the Jedi, the Sith, right and wrong, and yeah, I love Star Wars, like I said. I really do love it. And yeah, so we have talked about Star Wars movies coming out in 2026 and beyond, some projects that I want to see in the future of Star Wars. We've talked about some Star Wars games that I'm excited for. We've talked about the Star Wars sequel trilogy from George Lucas that could have been the sequel trilogy that we got, but instead Disney produced it, and we see how those films went with the fandom. I love Star Wars. I love talking about it in this episode. If you know somebody who does love Star Wars, share this podcast episode with them. This is Charles the Nerdiest, and this is episode 9 of the Nerdiest podcast on Spotify. Keep it real, keep loving Star Wars, and may the Force be with you.